There's something wrong with the empty tent we found in the Cascades. The silence inside isn't natural. I've been camping my whole life, but I've never heard silence like that before. Not the peaceful quiet of nature or the dead of night. I mean true, absolute silence, the kind that makes you question if you still exist. That's what we found in that tent, and I wish to God we'd never unzipped it in the first place. My girlfriend Mia and I had been planning this hiking trip for months. She's the adventurous one, always pushing me to try new trails and explore off the beaten path. I prefer sticking to marked routes, but she has this way of making everything sound exciting. "Come on, James," she'd say, her green eyes lighting up. "Where's your sense of adventure?" That was before we found the tent. Now, I never want to see another campsite again. We were 3 days into our trek through the Cascade Mountains when we spotted it. The weather had turned nasty, with a heavy mist clinging to the trees and making everything look slightly wrong, like a photo that's just a little out of focus. Mia spotted the blue tent first, pitched perfectly in a small clearing about 50 yards off the trail. "Hey, check that out," she called, already veering off the path. "Maybe they have some extra coffee we can beg for. I'm dying for a cup that isn't instant." I followed reluctantly, noting how the tent looked almost too perfect. No sagging fabric, no mud splatter despite the wet weather. Just pristine blue nylon gleaming through the mist. "I don't see anyone around," I said, scanning the clearing. No backpacks, no cooking equipment, no signs of life at all. Mia reached the tent first and called out a hello. No response. She unzipped the entrance and poked her head inside. "Hello? Hello? Anyone home?" The words came out strange, or rather, they didn't come out at all. Her mouth moved, but the sound just vanished. She pulled back, startled. "Did you hear that?" Or, "Not hear that, I guess?" I stepped forward and stuck my hand through the tent entrance, snapping my fingers. Nothing. Not even the muffled sound you get when snapping underwater. Just complete, absolute silence. Against my better judgment, we both crawled inside. The interior was ordinary enough. Sleeping bag, pillow, even a paperback book lying open face down. But every movement we made was swallowed by that impossible silence. I could feel my heart pounding, but couldn't hear it. Mia mouthed something to me, and I shook my head, pointing to my ears. The silence felt like a physical presence pressing against my eardrums. We got out of there fast. Mia wanted to set up our tent nearby. "Safety in numbers," she argued. I wanted to hike on, but the light was failing, and the mist had thickened into a proper fog. Reluctantly, I agreed to camp in the clearing, but insisted on positioning our tent so we could see the blue one from our entrance. At night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of Mia's steady breathing beside me was reassuring, normal, but I kept straining to hear anything from the other tent. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a rustling sound like someone moving around inside fabric. I shook Mia awake, and we both listened. The sound came again, definitely from the blue tent. Mia grabbed our flashlight before I could stop her. "We have to check," she whispered. "What if someone's in trouble?" The beam of our flashlight cut through the fog as we approached. The rustling had stopped. Mia's hand trembled as she reached for the zipper. Inside, empty, just like before. We searched the whole tent, but there was no sign anyone had been there. That's when Mia gasped. I followed her gaze to our left, where another tent had appeared, identical to the first. Same pristine blue nylon, same perfect pitch. but something was wrong. Wrong with its shape, like the geometry wasn't quite right. Mia moved toward it. I grabbed her arm. "Don't." "We have to know," she said, using that same tone she always did when convincing me to take risks. She pulled away and approached the new tent. The zipper sounded impossibly loud in the night air as the entrance opened. I saw nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, but nothing. It was like looking into a void that shouldn't exist, a hole in reality itself. And it was spreading, the edges of the tent opening seeming to widen impossibly. Mia stood transfixed. I saw her mouth move, forming words I couldn't hear. Then she took a step forward. I lunged for her, grabbing her jacket just as she began to lean into that impossible darkness. For a moment, we struggled at the edge of the void, me pulling back, her drawn forward by something I couldn't see. Then she blinked, like waking from a trance, and we both scrambled backward. We ran, left everything except what we were wearing, ran until our lungs burned and our legs gave out, following the trail by moonlight until we reached the ranger station at dawn. They never found our equipment or the blue tent or its impossible twin. The clearing itself seemed to have vanished. The ranger said there was no such spot where we described it. Mia doesn't go hiking anymore. She says she's lost her sense of adventure. But sometimes I can't help but wonder what would have happened if we'd entered deeper into that tent. If you're camping and smell something like rotting fruit mixed with candy, do not investigate. I should have known something was wrong when Maya's nosebleed wouldn't stop. We'd been camping for just 2 nights when it started, but none of us connected it to that sickeningly sweet smell that had been hanging around our campsite. You know how it is when you're out in the woods. Everything has its own weird scent, and after a while, you just stop questioning it. God, I wish we had questioned it sooner. There were 5 of us on this trip. Me, my boyfriend Derek, his sister Maya, our friend Chris, who organized the whole thing, and Chris's new girlfriend Jen, who none of us really knew that well. We'd planned this getaway for months, wanting to escape the summer heat in the city and explore some of the more remote trails in Blackwood Forest. Chris had found this spot online, far enough from the marked trails that we'd have total privacy, but still technically within the park boundaries. At least that's what he claimed. The first day was perfect. We set up our 3 tents in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, the kind that block out most of the sunlight even at noon. Derek and I took the blue tent. Maya had her own small one, and Chris shared his with Jen. We spent the afternoon hiking and gathering firewood, and that evening we sat around the campfire trading stories and passing around a bottle of whiskey Chris had brought. That's when I first noticed the smell. It was faint, like overripe fruit left in the sun too long, but with an underlying sweetness that reminded me of cotton candy. Maya mentioned it too, but Chris brushed it off, saying it was probably just some wild berry bushes nearby. Jen agreed, though something in her expression made me wonder if she was just trying to impress Chris. The second day, the smell was stronger, and that's when the weird stuff started happening. Maya woke up with dried blood crusted around her nostrils, and Derek complained about an itchy rash on his arms. I noticed similar red patches starting to form on my neck. We blamed it on mosquitoes, on allergies, on anything that made sense. Normal explanations for normal problems, right? But then Jen started acting strange. She kept wandering off from the group, always in the same direction toward a dense patch of undergrowth about 50 yards from our campsite. When she'd come back, she'd have dirt under her fingernails and this vacant look in her eyes. Chris tried to joke about it, saying she was probably just looking for a private spot to pee, but I caught him watching her with growing concern. On the third night, the smell became unbearable. It was like someone had dumped a gallon of perfume mixed with rotting meat all over our campsite. None of us could sleep. Around midnight, we heard Jen leave her tent. Through the mesh window of ours, Derek and I watched her walk into the woods with jerky, puppet-like movements. Chris followed her this time. They came running back 20 minutes later, Chris shouting for us to pack up now. But it was too late. We could all hear them now, footsteps circling our campsite, twigs snapping in patterns too deliberate to be animals. And that smell, it was everywhere, filling our lungs, making us gag. Maya was the one who finally spotted it, a patch of disturbed earth where Jen had been digging. Her hands trembling, she pointed her flashlight at the ground, and we saw pale fingers poking through the soil. Chris started digging frantically, and soon we uncovered what was causing the smell. A body. It couldn't have been dead more than a week, wrapped in plastic that had split open in the summer heat. That's when we heard the laugh. High-pitched, delighted, coming from right behind us. We spun around to find Jen standing there, her face split in a wide grin that didn't reach her eyes. "I knew you'd find her eventually," she said, her voice eerily calm. "They always do. The smell makes sure of that." Derek grabbed my arm and whispered, "Run." But as we turned to flee, we saw them. Shadowy figures emerging from between the trees, all wearing the same twisted smile as Jen. The smell was overwhelming now, and I realized with horror that it wasn't coming from the body at all. It was coming from them. I'm writing this from a hospital bed. They found us 2 days later, all except Chris. The doctors can't explain the chemical burns in our nasal passages or the strange patterns the rash left on our skin. They ask me questions about what happened, but I can't tell them the truth. How do you explain that your friend's new girlfriend was part of some cult that uses corpses as bait? That they get off on watching people slowly realize they're being hunted? The police found 6 more bodies buried in that clearing, all recent, all wrapped in the same plastic. They never found Chris or Jen. If you're planning a camping trip and you catch a whiff of something sweet, something that reminds you of cotton candy and rotting fruit, run. Run as fast as you can. And whatever you do, don't look back to see who's smiling at you from between the trees. My friends and I found a strange wax shrine while camping. Now I'm the only one left to warn others. I wish I could blame this all on exhaustion or paranoia, but the waxy residue still under my fingernails proves otherwise. It's been 3 days since I made it out of Mystic Grove Forest, and I still can't shake the smell, that sickly sweet mixture of beeswax and something else. Something that reminds me of rendered fat left too long in the sun. I need to write this down while the details are fresh, while I can still remember Charlotte's face when she realized what we'd done. God, Charlotte, I'm so sorry. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. 4 friends trying to reconnect after college had pulled us in different directions. Charlotte, my best friend since middle school, had suggested Mystic Grove Forest. She'd always been our group's adventure seeker, the one who pushed us out of our comfort zones. Ben, ever the skeptic, had Googled the location immediately and found all those missing persons reports. He laughed them off as local folklore, but something in those stories caught my attention. They all mentioned a sweet smell, like candles burning in an enclosed space. "Come on, Emma," Charlotte had said, her eyes bright with that familiar spark of mischief. "When's the last time we all did something spontaneous?" She had a point. Between my accounting job, Ben's medical residency, Charlotte's freelance photography, and Jake's startup, we barely had time for group texts anymore. The first day was perfect, almost suspiciously so. We found an ideal camping spot near a small clearing, the kind you see in outdoor magazines. Jake, always the Boy Scout, got our tents up while Ben collected firewood. Charlotte wandered off with her camera, hunting for what she called golden hour magic. I remember feeling so at peace, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. That should have been my first warning. In horror movies, it's always the perfect days that turn ugly. We found the shrine just before sunset. Charlotte spotted it first, a crude structure about waist-high, made entirely of what looked like yellowed wax and hardened fat. The thing was grotesque, with odd lumps and protrusions that almost resembled faces if you looked too long. Around its base, small animal bones had been arranged in patterns that made my eyes hurt if I tried to follow them. That's when the hiker showed up. He was a thin man with weathered skin and eyes that seemed too wide for his face. He didn't introduce himself, just stood at the edge of our camp and stared at the shrine. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Not near their offering place." Ben, always ready with a smart comment, asked, "On whose offering place?" "The tallow men," the hiker replied, still not looking at us. "They protect the forest. Take what they're owed from those who don't show respect." He told us about them. Waxy figures that moved like stop-motion animation come to life, leaving greasy trails wherever they touched. According to him, they'd been here since before the first settlers, spirits of the forest that had taken on forms mimicking human bodies but made from rendered fat and beeswax. We laughed it off, of course. Jake even took a selfie next to the shrine, making a face. The hiker just shook his head and walked away. Looking back, I wish we'd paid attention to which direction he went. Later that night, when we tried to find the main trail, we realized no one could remember seeing him actually leave. The handprints showed up that first night. I spotted them on my tent while getting ready for bed. Perfect impressions of human hands, but made from something that looked like melted candle wax. They were still warm to the touch. Charlotte wanted to pack up right then, but Ben convinced us it was just some local kids playing pranks. Jake backed him up, suggesting we were letting the hiker's story get to us. Then our supplies started disappearing. First, it was small things. Ben's phone charger, Jake's flashlight, my granola bars. But on the second night, we woke up to find Charlotte's entire backpack gone, along with all our maps. The waxy handprints had multiplied, now forming trails that led into the darker parts of the forest. When we tried to follow them, we kept getting turned around, ending up back at our camp no matter which direction we took. That's when we started seeing them. Just glimpses at first. Tall, humanoid figures standing between distant trees. They looked like rough approximations of people, as if someone had tried to mold human shapes out of melted wax, but got all the proportions slightly wrong. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like watching frame-by-frame footage played just a bit too slowly. Jake cracked first. He tried to run for it in the middle of the night, screaming about how they were getting closer. We heard him for about 5 minutes, his voice getting fainter and fainter until it just stopped. Charlotte wanted to look for him, but Ben held her back. "They're hurting us," he said, his voice shaking. I'm not proud of what happened next. We fought about what to do, each of us blaming the others for getting us into this mess. That's when Charlotte noticed the shrine had changed. The wax faces in it were clearer now, and one of them, oh God, one of them looked exactly like Jake. Ben tried to destroy the shrine. Charlotte and I begged him not to, but he wouldn't listen. He kept saying it was just wax, just some sick joke. The moment his boot connected with it, the air filled with that sickly sweet smell so strong it made us gag. And the figures, they stopped being glimpses. They stepped out into the clearing, their waxy bodies glistening in the moonlight, moving with that horrible stuttering motion. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. The last thing I heard was Charlotte screaming of Ben's name and a wet sound like candle wax being poured onto stone. I made it out somehow, though the next few hours are a blur. The police didn't believe my story, of course. They're still searching for the others, but I know they won't find them. If you're planning a camping trip to Mystic Grove Forest, please stay away from any shrines you might find, and if you smell something sweet, like beeswax and rendered fat, back off. My sister died in a climbing accident 6 months ago. Last week, I found her skin hanging from a tree. I've been trying to write this down for days, but my hands won't stop shaking. The doctors say writing about it might help, but they don't understand. Every time I close my eyes, I see those empty shells hanging from the branches, gently swaying in the breeze like grotesque wind chimes. The worst part? I keep checking my own skin, running my fingers along the seams, making sure it isn't becoming loose, making sure it still belongs to me. It started 3 weeks ago when I decided to take that solo camping trip to Red Bark State Forest. My therapist had suggested it. Reconnect with nature to process your grief, she said. It had been 6 months since Sheila's accident, and I hadn't been handling it well. My sister was always the adventurous one, always dragging me on hiking trips and outdoor excursions. The irony that a climbing accident took her still haunts me. Maybe that's why I chose to go camping alone. Some misguided attempt to channel her spirit. The first 2 days were actually peaceful. I found a secluded spot near Crystal Lake, far from the marked trails and tourist-friendly campgrounds. Sheila would have loved it. Pristine water, ancient pines, and that profound silence you can only find deep in the wilderness. I spent my time setting up camp, taking photos of interesting fungi, my latest hobby, and trying to identify bird calls using an app she had installed on my phone months ago. The third morning, everything changed. I was gathering firewood when I spotted something pale hanging from a branch about 15 feet up. At first, I thought it was just some trash left behind by careless hikers. But as I got closer, my blood ran cold. It was a deer skin, complete, unblemished, and impossibly intact. No blood, no tears, no sign of violence. It looked as if the deer had simply stepped out of it. I've seen taxidermied animals before. This was different. The skin was fresh, almost translucent in the morning light, with a weird silvery sheen to it. What really got to me were the edges. They weren't cut or torn. They looked more like openings, like the seams of a costume. I should have left right then. Sheila would have. She always said the wilderness demands respect, and that when something feels wrong, you listen to that instinct. But I convinced myself there must be a logical explanation. Maybe it was some kind of art installation, or perhaps local hunters had strange practices. I took some photos and tried to put it out of my mind. That night, the whispers started. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard it, a sound like dry leaves being crushed underfoot, circling my tent. Then came the breathing, heavy and wet, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I lay perfectly still, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. The footsteps stopped right outside my tent. "Warm," whispered a voice that wasn't quite human. It had too many layers, like multiple people speaking slightly out of sync. "This one's still warm," another voice responded, higher pitched, but with that same unsettling multiplicity. Fresh, supplemental, perfect. I didn't sleep that night. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, I finally worked up the courage to unzip my tent. What I found made me wish I hadn't. They were everywhere. Human skins, dozens of them, hanging from the branches like macabre decorations. Men, women, even children, all complete, all hollow, all with those same strange seams. Some were fresh, with that same silvery sheen as the deer skin. Others were older, dried and darkened like ancient parchment. Each face was frozen in an expression of terror. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. One of the fresher skins looked familiar. It took me a moment to place it, but when I did, my world shattered. The small crescent-shaped scar on the left shoulder, the tiny tattoo behind the ear, it was Sheila. What they found at the bottom of that cliff hadn't been her body. It had been an empty shell. I ran. I'd like to say I was brave, that I tried to investigate or fight back. But primal terror took over. I left everything except my phone and car keys as I sprinted through the forest. I could hear them pursuing me, not just their footsteps, but the horrible sound of their not quite right movements, like leather stretching and creaking. "Such lovely seams," they called after me, "such a perfect fit." I made it to my car, though I still don't remember most of that desperate flight through the woods. The authorities found my abandoned campsite, but of course there were no skins hanging in the trees. Just some loose trash caught in the branches, they said. They're monitoring me now, concerned about my episode. But I know what I saw. More importantly, I know they're still out there. Sometimes I've been finding silvery strands stuck to my clothes, like the delicate threads you might use to sew a costume. My skin feels looser these days. The doctors say it's just anxiety, that I'm imagining things. But this morning, I found something in the mirror that I can't explain away. A thin, silvery line along my shoulder, exactly like the seams I saw in the forest. I think they're coming to finish what they started. And the worst part? Part of me wants to know what it feels like, stepping out of yourself, becoming hollow. Sheila would understand. After all, she's one of them now. If you're reading this and you go camping, remember, not everything that looks human is wearing their fur skin. And if you hear whispers in the night about warmth and perfect fits, run away as fast as you can and never go back, because they're always looking for new skins to wear. The trees in Elderwood Grove don't just sway in the wind, they breathe. I learned this the hard way. I've always found comfort in solitude, especially among ancient trees. That was before I learned that some forms of solitude aren't meant to be disturbed, and some forests prefer to keep their secrets buried. Now, when I hear the wind whisper through leaves, I can't help but wonder if it's really the wind at all. My name is Ava Villa, and I'm a wildlife photographer specializing in old-growth forests. I've spent countless nights alone in the wilderness, documenting the subtle changes that occur when human eyes aren't watching. That's what brought me to the Elderwood Grove, a remote stretch of forest that hadn't been properly surveyed since the 1970s. Local hiking forums mention unusual wind patterns and inexplicable equipment malfunctions, but I dealt with worse. Besides, I needed this shoot for my upcoming exhibition on threatened ecosystems. The trouble started on my second night. I'd set up camp in a small clearing surrounded by towering hemlocks, their trunks wider than my car. The first day had been productive. I captured some stunning shots of rare fungi and what I believed to be an undocumented species of moss. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary except perhaps how quiet it was. No bird song, no scurrying creatures. I chalked it up to the density of the canopy and my own presence disturbing the wildlife. That night, I woke to what sounded like someone with pneumonia struggling to breathe. The sound was distant but distinct. A wet, rattling inhale followed by a long, wheezing exhale. My first thought was that another hiker might be in distress. I grabbed my flashlight and poked my head out of the tent, but the beam revealed only still trees and ground fog. "Hello," I called out. "Is anyone there?" The breathing stopped immediately. The silence that followed was absolute, pressing against my ears like cotton. I waited for several minutes, straining to hear anything, but there was nothing, not even the usual nighttime forest sounds. Just as I was about to go back inside, a gust of wind rushed through the clearing, making the trees sway and creak. Of course, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks. But when I laid back down, I noticed something odd. The wind was moving through the trees in a pattern. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Each breath seemed to draw closer, and with it, the trees appeared to lean inward, their shadows stretching across my tent like grasping fingers. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Trees don't breathe. Trees don't move on their own. I'm a scientist, for God's sake. I know better than to let my imagination run wild. Still, I found myself taking photos of the trees' positions, marking their alignment against my tent's frame, just to prove to myself nothing was changing. When I checked the photos an hour later, my hand started shaking. The trees had moved, not by much, maybe a few degrees, but they were definitely closer to my tent than before. The breathing had grown louder, too, no longer just from one direction, but seemingly from all around me. The sound had a presence to it now, a weight that pressed down on my chest and made my own breathing shallow. I decided to pack up and leave. I'd gotten enough photos anyway, and something about this place felt deeply wrong. But as I started breaking down my tent, my headlamp caught something strange in the undergrowth. Thin, pale tendrils that looked like roots, but moved slightly like seaweed in a current. They weren't there when I set up camp. The breathing suddenly grew louder, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Those tendrils were everywhere now, forming a web-like pattern that all led to a central point about 20 feet from my campsite. As I watched, horrified, the earth there began to bulge upward. I abandoned my tent and gear, grabbing only my camera and phone, But when I turned to run, I found my path blocked by trees that I swear weren't that close before. I tried another direction, but it was the same. The forest had closed in around me, forming a tight circle. The breathing was deafening now, and it didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded hungry. That's when I remembered something I'd read about carnivorous plants and their hunting strategies. Some use chemical lures, others use tripwires, but the most successful ones mimic their prey's natural environment, making them feel safe until it's too late. The ground erupted behind me. I spun around and barely managed to take one photo before running blindly into the forest. Whatever emerged from that hole, I caught only glimpses of pale, fibrous flesh somewhere between fungus and root, pulsing with a sickly bioluminescence. The photo on my camera shows even less, just a blur of white against the darkness. Through sheer force and will, I was able to escape, though the memory is blurry. The next clear memory I have is stumbling onto a hiking trail at dawn, miles from where I'd set up camp. When I reported what happened, the park rangers found my campsite exactly as I'd left it, except there was no sign of any hole, no pale tendrils, and the trees were spaced normally. They suggested I might have gotten turned around in the dark, maybe eaten some bad mushrooms. But I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know that somewhere in the Elderwood Grove there's something ancient and patient, something that's learned to hunt by making the forest itself into a trap. It's still there, breathing, waiting for the next person who thinks they're alone in the woods. I still work as a wildlife photographer, but I don't do solo camping anymore. And when the wind blows through the trees, making that soft rushing sound, I can't help but hold my breath and listen just to make sure it's really the wind I'm hearing. I've spent my entire career studying the secrets of the past, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found beneath Stonehenge. My name is Dr. Elia Marlowe, and this is likely to be my final testimony. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to seal the horror I've unleashed upon our world. It all began on a crisp autumn morning, just weeks before my planned retirement. The fog clung to the ancient stones like a shroud, as if trying to keep their secrets hidden. I'd grown up in the shadow of these monoliths, their mystery a constant whisper in my ear. My grandmother used to tell me stories of the old ways of druids and sacrifices, but even her wildest tales paled in comparison to the truth. I remember the day I decided to become an archaeologist. I was just a boy, no more than 10, playing in the fields near Stonehenge. My friends and I were digging for treasure as children do, when my small shovel struck something hard. It was a piece of pottery, nothing special to the untrained eye, but to me, it was a window into the past. I ran home, clutching my find, and declared to my bemused parents that I would uncover all of Stonehenge's secrets. How naive I was then, how innocent of the horrors that lay dormant beneath the earth. Over the decades, I built my career on studying Neolithic sites across Britain, but Stonehenge always called me back. It was an obsession, a siren song I couldn't resist. I published papers, gave lectures, and slowly climbed the academic ladder, all while feeling that the true secret of the stones remained just out of reach. When the opportunity came for this final excavation, I jumped at the chance. Our team had been granted unprecedented access to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys around the site. It was supposed to be my swan song, a final contribution to the field I dedicated my life to. If only I'd known then what I know now, I would have walked away and never looked back. The first week of the survey was uneventful. We meticulously gridded the area, taking readings and compiling data. My younger colleagues joked about finding hidden chambers or ancient treasures, but I learned long ago to temper my expectations. Archaeology is often a game of patience, of piecing together the smallest clues to form a larger picture. It was on the 8th day that everything changed. The first anomaly appeared on our screens like a dark smudge, easy to dismiss as a glitch or a natural formation, but as we refined our scans, a pattern emerged. A perfect circle far too precise to be natural, hidden just meters below the surface. My heart raced with excitement, my scientific mind already conjuring images of hidden chambers and ancient artifacts. We began the excavation with painstaking care, every centimeter of soil meticulously documented and preserved. The local press buzzed with speculation, but we kept our findings tightly under wraps. Each layer we removed seemed to vibrate with a strange energy, as if the very earth was holding its breath in anticipation. It wasn't until we reached the capstone that I felt the first inkling of dread. The stone was unlike anything I'd ever seen, darker than obsidian, with strange shifting patterns that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. And the symbols carved into its surface, they weren't like any known ancient script. They seemed to writhe and squirm, making my eyes water if I stared too long. I should have stopped there. I should have reburied everything and warned the world never to dig here again. But curiosity, that damned human trait that's led us to our greatest discoveries and our darkest hours, pushed me forward. It took our entire team to shift the capstone, and as it grated across the ground, a gust of stale, fetid air rushed up from below. The stench was indescribable, not the musty smell of an ancient tomb, but something far older, far wronger. It carried with it whispers, barely audible, in a language that made my skin crawl. The chamber below was vast, far larger than should have been possible given the area we'd excavated. Its walls were lined with the same dark stone as the capstone, pulsing with a sickly greenish light that seemed to absorb the beams from our flashlights. And at its center stood an altar, if you could call it that, a twisted mass of stone and metal shaped into a form that hurt the mind to look upon. I approached it, drawn by an impulse I couldn't explain. The whispers grew louder, and I realized with horror that they were coming from inside my own head. Images flashed before my eyes, vast, incomprehensible beings that existed before time itself, using our reality as a playground, a testing ground, a doorway. I saw great cities of non-Euclidean geometry built by beings of such alien aspect that my mind rebelled at the sight of them. I witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations on distant worlds, each one a mere experiment in the grand designs of these eldritch entities. And I saw Earth, a precious blue marble there, nothing more than a speck of dust in their unfathomable cosmic game. And Stonehenge, it wasn't just a religious monument or an astronomical calendar. It was a lock, a seal keeping something out or in. The standing stones above were keys, their placement a complex mechanism that, when aligned properly, would open a gateway to somewhere else. A place beyond our comprehension, where the laws of physics were mere suggestions and madness was the only sane response. I don't know how long I stood there, my mind reeling from visions no human was meant to comprehend. When I came to my senses, I was alone in the chamber. My team, God, my team. I found what was left of them, scattered around the site, their bodies twisted into impossible shapes, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Dr. Sarah Chin, my brilliant protege, lay crumpled at the base of one of the stones, her limbs bent at angles that defied anatomy. Jack Pearson, our geophysicist, was found fused into the very stone he'd spent years studying, his flesh seamlessly melding with the ancient rock. And poor Tom Davis, barely more than an intern, his eyes were gone, replaced by swirling vortexes of that same sickly green light that pulsed within the chamber. I stumbled away from the carnage, my mind teetering on the brink of sanity. The weight of what I'd uncovered pressed down on me, threatening to crush my very soul, but I knew I couldn't succumb. Not yet. Someone had to warn the world, had to try to contain this madness before it spread. I've sealed the entrance as best I could, using a mixture of modern concrete and ancient rituals I half remembered from my grandmother's stories, but I fear it's only a temporary measure. The alignment is coming. I can feel it in my bones, in the thrumming of the air itself. Whatever lies on the other side of that gateway is awakening, stretching, preparing to step through. Each night since that fateful discovery, my dreams have been plagued by visions of what's to come. I see the stones of Stonehenge vibrating with otherworldly energy, the very fabric of reality tearing apart as the gateway opens. Tentacles of impossible size and geometry slide through the breach, followed by entities so vast and alien that the mere sight of them drives people mad. I've tried to warn my colleagues, the authorities, anyone who will listen, but who would believe the ravings of an old man, especially one who can't produce any evidence? The chamber remains sealed, and I dare not open it again, even to prove my story. The risk is too great. So, I'm writing this account in the hope that someone will find it, will understand the danger. Stonehenge must be destroyed, the ground beneath it sown with salt and iron. But even as I write these words, I can feel my resolve weakening. The whispers are getting louder, more insistent. They promise knowledge, power, transcendence. Part of me wants to stay to see what emerges when the stars align and the gateway opens. That's how they get you, I suppose. Not with threats or brute force, but with temptation. The offer of answers to questions we were never meant to ask. I find myself drawn back to the site night after night, standing just beyond the perimeter, staring at the looming silhouettes of the stones against the starry sky. Sometimes I swear I can see shapes moving between them, things that vanish when I try to focus on them. And always there are the whispers. They tell me I'm special, that I was chosen for this, that my lifetime of study and dedication was all in preparation for this moment. They promised me knowledge beyond human comprehension, power beyond mortal reckoning. All I have to do is return to the chamber, to stand before the altar and speak the words that now burn in my mind. But I resist, clinging to the last shreds of my humanity. I think of my granddaughter, of the world I want her to inherit, not one of chaos and madness, but of beauty and wonder. And so I fight, even as I feel my grip on reality slipping day by day. If you're reading this, heed my warning. Stay away from Stonehenge. Forget the mysteries, the allure of discovery. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, some doors left unopened. And if you hear whispers on the wind promising you the world, run. Run and don't look back. For what lies beneath Stonehenge is older than humanity, older than Earth itself, and it hungers for a way back in. I don't know how much longer I can resist the call. Each day is a battle against the knowledge that burns within me, threatening to consume what's left of my sanity. I've made arrangements for this manuscript to be delivered to multiple sources should anything happen to me. It's my last hope, my final stand against the darkness that looms on the horizon. To whoever reads this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my hubris, for thinking I could uncover the secrets of Stonehenge without consequence. I'm sorry for unleashing a horror upon this world that I cannot hope to contain. And I'm sorry for the burden I now place upon you, the knowledge of what lurks beneath those ancient stones. The alignment is coming. The gateway will open. And when it does, may whatever God still listens have mercy on us all. This is Dr. Elijah Marlowe signing off for the last time. Remember Stonehenge not as a wonder of the ancient world, but as a warning. Some doors are meant to stay closed, some secrets never meant to see the light of day. Farewell and good luck. You're going to need it. I never should have opened that chest. The worn, leather-bound journal sat in my lap, its pages yellowed with age, the scent of musty parchment filling my nostrils. My hands trembled as I traced the faded script on the cover, the true account of Rowan O, as witnessed by Eleanor Dare, my ancestors' words, my legacy, my curse. For years, I'd searched for answers about my family's connection to the lost colony of Roanoke. As a historian specializing in early American settlements, I'd always felt a pull toward that mysterious chapter in our nation's past, but I never imagined the horror that awaited me. It started with the dreams, visions of dense, mist-shrouded forests, whispers in a language I couldn't understand, the sensation of being watched by countless unseen eyes. I chalked it up to stress from my obsession with my research. But then I found the chest hidden in the attic of my grandmother's old Virginia home. The ancient oak box had been passed down through generations, its contents a closely guarded secret. When the lock finally gave way beneath my trembling fingers, I knew I'd stumbled upon something momentous. But I had no idea how it would shatter everything I thought I knew about history and about myself. The first few entries in Eleanor's journal were unremarkable. She wrote of the journey across the Atlantic, the hope for a new life in the new world. But as I turned the brittle pages, the tone shifted. Eleanor's neat script grew frantic, the ink blotched with what looked unsettlingly like dried blood. August 18th, 1587. We have been here but a month, and already something is terribly wrong. The forest watches us. It hungers. God help us all. I rid on, my heart pounding. Eleanor told a tale far more terrifying than any disappearance. The colonists hadn't vanished. They'd been claimed. An ancient entity dwelling in the primordial forests of the New World had awakened, hungry for flesh and devotion. It spoke to them in their dreams, promising power and immortality in exchange for sacrifice. Some resisted, Eleanor among them, but as crops failed and children sickened, desperation set in. One by one, the settlers succumbed to the entity's whispers. They ventured into the woods, never to return as humans. September 3rd, 1587. Thomas ventured into the trees at dawn. We heard his screams until nightfall. What emerged, wearing his skin, was not my husband. Those who remained were transformed, their bodies twisted into something inhuman, their minds warped by eldritch knowledge. Eleanor's descriptions made my stomach churn, limbs elongating into branch-like appendages, skin hardening into bark, eyes multiplying across torsos, faces contorting into inhuman masks. The disappearance of the colony was a cover-up, a ritual enacted by the last few unchanged survivors to contain the entity and its transformed acolytes. They erased all trace of Roanoke, sealing away the horror they'd unleashed. We are the last. The entity sleeps, but it is not defeated. We have bound it with blood and sacrifice, but the seal will not hold forever. To those of my blood who may read this in years to come, beware, the forest remembers, and it will call to you. But rituals fade, seals weaken, and bloodlines remember. As I read Eleanor's frantic warnings, I felt a stirring in my blood, an awakening. The entity had slumbered these long centuries, but now it called to me, its last remaining descendant, the one who could complete the circle. I tried to resist. I burned the journal, fled across the country, sought help from experts in fields both scientific and occult. But the dreams grew stronger. The whispers became a cacophony, and slowly I began to change. It started with my skin. Patches grew mottled and rough like tree bark. My hair fell out in clumps, replaced by twisting vines. My bones ached as they elongated and warped. I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors and no longer recognized the thing staring back. The entity's voice grew clearer with each passing day. It showed me visions of power beyond imagining, of secrets hidden since the dawn of time. All I had to do was return to Roanoke, to take my place among my transformed kin, to complete the ritual and usher in a new age of terror. I resisted for as long as I could. I barricaded myself in my apartment, covered all the mirrors, tried to drown out the whispers with endless loops of white noise. But the call of the forest was relentless. It seeped into my dreams, my thoughts, the very marrow of my changing bones. One night, driven to the brink of madness, I found myself standing at the edge of a dense forest. I had no memory of how I'd gotten there, but I knew with terrible certainty where I was. Roanoke Island, home. The trees seemed to part before me, creating a path into the depths of the woods. As I stepped forward, my feet sinking into the loamy soil, I felt a sense of homecoming, of rightness. The whispers in my mind crescendoed into a triumphant roar. Deep in the heart of the forest, I found them, my kin, the lost colonists of Roanoke, transformed beyond recognition into creatures of bark, vine, and hungering shadow. They welcomed me with open arms, dozens of arms twisting and grasping. I should have been terrified. I should have run screaming. But as the entity's presence washed over me, filling me with ancient, terrible knowledge, I felt only peace. This was where I belonged, where we all belonged now. As I write these final words, I can feel the last vestiges of my humanity slipping away. My fingers are elongating, bark creeping up my arms. Soon I will join my brethren in the deep woods, guardians of a slumbering horror. I'm writing this now as a warning, as a confession. My mind is still my own, but I don't know for how much longer. I can feel the pull of the forest, the call of something ancient and hungry stirring beneath the soil of Roanoke Island. If you're reading this, it may already be too late. The entity is awakening. The lost colonists are stirring in their ageless slumber, and I am going home. To those who come seeking answers about Roanoke, I beg you, stay away. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some truths are too horrible to face. The wind outside my window sounds like whispers now. Branches scrape against glass with fingernail-like precision. I have to go. It's calling me. Remember Roanoke. Remember and beware. For the forest is patient. The forest is hungry, and the forest never forgets its own. I've carried this secret for far too long. The weight of it has bent my spine and whitened my hair, but it's nothing compared to the burden of knowing what's out there waiting in those cursed mountains. You've all heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, I'm sure. 9 hikers found dead under mysterious circumstances. But what you don't know, what they've kept hidden all these years, is that there was a 10th member of our group, me. My name is Nikolai Andreev, and I'm the sole survivor of what really happened in the Ural Mountains on that frigid February night in 1959. I was 24 then, a student like the others, but with one crucial difference. I'd spent my childhood summers with my grandfather, an old hunter who taught me the ways of the taiga. Those skills saved my life, but sometimes I wonder if death wouldn't have been kinder. We were young, ambitious, ready to conquer the world one mountain at a time. The trek to Mount Otorten was supposed to be challenging, but not impossible. How could we have known we were walking into the hunting grounds of something ancient and hungry? I remember the day we set out like it was yesterday. The sky was a pale, wintry blue, and our breath frosted in the air as we shouldered our packs. Igor Dyatlov, our unofficial leader, checked our supplies one last time. His confidence was infectious, and we all felt invincible. Yuri strummed his mandolin, and Lyudmila's laughter rang out across the snow. We were 10 friends on an adventure, blissfully unaware of the horror that awaited us. The first few days were uneventful, filled with the kind of camaraderie that only comes from shared challenges. We'd huddle around the campfire at night, sharing stories and dreams. Tatiana talked about the thesis she was working on, while Alexandra regaled us with jokes that had us clutching our sides with laughter. Those moments of joy make what followed all the more terrible. As we ventured deeper into the pass, the landscape began to change subtly. The trees became more gnarled, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. An unnatural silence fell over the land. The wind stopped whispering through the pines, and even our breath seemed muffled in the still air. It was Igor who first sensed something was wrong. "We're being watched," he said, his eyes darting nervously across the snowy slopes. We laughed it off, but a seed of unease had been planted. That night, as I took my turn on watch, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were boring into me from the darkness beyond our camp. The next day, we found strange tracks in the snow, too large for any animal we knew, with an odd shuffling gait that made no sense. Rustam, our resident expert on local wildlife, was baffled. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered, a worried crease between his brows. That night, huddled in our tents, we heard it, a low, pulsating hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It taunted us, burrowing into our minds, setting our teeth on edge. Yuri suggested it was just the wind, but we all knew better. There was something out there, circling our camp. None of us slept well. In the morning, Lyudmila reported having vivid, terrifying nightmares. "I saw something in the mountains," she said, her voice shaking. "Something old, something waiting." We tried to comfort her, but her words had struck a chord of primal fear in all of us. As we continued our trek, the feeling of wrongness grew stronger. The landscape seemed to shift when we weren't looking directly at it. More than once, I could have sworn I saw shadows moving against the white of the snow, only for them to vanish, when I turned my head. On our final night, though we didn't know it then, we made camp on the slopes of YAKLICH, a name which translates to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. That should have been warning enough, but we were tired, cold, and eager to make progress. I woke to screams. The night was alive with chaos, tent fabric ripping, people shouting in terror. I burst out into the frigid air and saw, I still struggle to describe it. It wasn't a creature, not in any sense we understand. It was like a tear in reality, a writhing mass of darkness that hurt to look at directly. Tentacles of shadow whipped through the air, and where they touched, the very fabric of the world seemed to warp and twist. My friends were running, scattering in all directions. I saw Lyudmila stumble, her body contorting unnaturally as the thing's influence took hold. Zina and Semyon were clawing at their own faces, driven mad by what they'd seen. Igor was shouting orders, trying to rally us, but his words were swallowed by the otherworldly hum that now filled the air. I ran. God help me, I ran. My grandfather's training took over. Find cover, stay low, control your breathing. I wedged myself into a crevice between two boulders, praying to whatever might listen that the thing wouldn't find me. For hours, I listened to the screams of my friends echoing across the mountain. One by one, they fell silent. The hum grew louder, filling my head until I thought my skull would split. I bit down on my glove to keep from crying out, tasting blood and wool and fear. When dawn finally broke, I emerged to a scene of impossible horror. Bodies strewn across the snow, broken in ways that defied explanation. Some looked as though they'd been crushed by an immense weight, while others bore no visible marks at all. Their faces were frozen in expressions of utmost terror, and always that lingering sense of wrongness in the air. I searched desperately for survivors, but found none. The entity, whatever it was, had vanished with the night, but I could feel its presence lingering like oil on water. This was its territory, and we had been nothing but prey. Gathering what supplies I could, I began the long, harrowing journey down the mountain. Every shadow, every unexplained sound set my heart racing. I felt certain that at any moment that tear, in reality, would reappear, and I would join my friends in whatever lay beyond. I made my way down the mountain in a day, my mind struggling to process what I'd witnessed. When I finally reached civilization, I tried to tell them, the police, the search parties, anyone who would listen. But they didn't believe me. How could they? It was easier to blame the cold, or an avalanche, or even Soviet military tests. A week after I'd given my statement, 2 men in dark suits came to see me. They knew everything about the entity, about similar incidents stretching back centuries. They showed me files, photographs of other expeditions that had vanished in the same region. Some dated back to the Tsarist era, yellowed pages filled with accounts of shadows that walk and the watcher in the mountains. They made it clear I was to never speak of what I'd seen. The world wasn't ready for the truth. They offered me a choice: keep silent and live, or persist in telling my story and face consequences. The threat was clear in their eyes. For decades, I've kept my silence, watching from afar as theories and documentaries tried to explain what happened to my friends. I've seen the photos of the search parties, the confused reports trying to make sense of the senseless. Every time I see those familiar faces in old photographs, Igor's confident smile, Lyudmila's bright eyes, my heart breaks anew. I've tried to move on, to build a life. I married, had children, pursued a quiet career far from the mountains. But the memories never faded. On cold nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of that otherworldly hum ringing in my ears. Over the years, I've done my own research, quietly and carefully. I found whispers of similar incidents across the world, expeditions that vanished without a trace, lone travelers found in impossible circumstances, always in remote places, always with the same sense of wrongness surrounding them. The thing in Dyatlov Pass is still there. I feel it sometimes in my dreams. The otherworldly hum, the sense of being watched. It's waiting, as it has for millennia, for more unsuspecting souls to wander into its domain. I thought about going back, of trying to find proof, or maybe even confront it. But the fear is too great. I know that if I return to those mountains, I won't come back. I'm an old man now, and I fear what might happen if this secret dies with me. The world has changed. Maybe people are ready to hear the truth, to understand that there are things out there beyond our comprehension. Or maybe I'm just a coward, finally trying to unburden myself of this terrible knowledge. I don't expect you to believe me. Sometimes I'm not sure I believe it myself. But the next time you're in the wilderness and feel that prickle on the back of your neck, that certainty that something's watching you from just beyond the tree line, remember my warning. Not all predators in this world are ones we can understand, and some hungers can never be satisfied. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains officially unsolved, but I know the truth. I've lived with it for over 60 years, and as I write these words, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere in the cold peaks of the Ural, something ancient and patient is stirring once more. God help us all if it ever decides to leave its mountain home. The Bermuda Triangle isn't just a place where things disappear, it's where they're taken. I know because I was one of them for 42 years. I was trapped in a nightmare beyond imagination. Now that I'm back, I almost wish I'd stayed lost. The horrors I've seen, the things I've experienced, they've changed me in ways I can't even begin to describe, but I have to try. People need to know the truth about what's out there waiting in that timeless abyss. My name is Jack Hawkins. In 1982, I was a 28-year-old sailor with salt in my veins and adventure in my heart. I'd grown up on the docks of Miami, learning to tie knots before I could write my name. The sea was my home, my love, my life. Little did I know it would become my prison. It was supposed to be a routine cargo run to Bermuda. Clear skies, calm seas, perfect sailing weather. I remember joking with my crew as we entered the triangle. We'd all heard the stories, of course, but none of us really believed them. They were just tall tales to scare the greenhorns, right? I remember checking my watch as we crossed into those infamous waters, 2:14 p.m., July 17th, 1982. That was the last time I saw a clock for over 4 decades. The change was sudden. One moment, we were cutting through blue waves under a blazing sun. The next, we were enveloped in an impenetrable fog. The air grew thick, almost gelatinous, and breathing became difficult, like trying to inhale syrup. I tried to call out to my crew, but my voice sounded muffled, as if I were shouting underwater. Then came the silence, the constant hum of the ship's engines, the lapping of waves against the hull. All of it vanished in an instant. In that deafening quiet, I heard something else. Whispers, countless voices speaking in languages I'd never heard, some that didn't even sound human. It was like listening to the murmur of a crowded room, but the words were all wrong. The cadences were alien and unsettling. I don't know how long we drifted in that fog. Time. It didn't work right there. Sometimes the sun would rise and set in what felt like minutes. Other times, the night would stretch on for what seemed like weeks. My watch had stopped, its hands frozen at 2:14, but it wasn't just broken. Sometimes I'd look at it, and the hands would be in different positions, as if it was trying to tell time but couldn't quite remember how. The fog played tricks on our minds. We'd see things, impossible things, islands that appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye, sea creatures larger than our ship, their bodies twisting in ways that defied physics. Once, I swear, I saw another ship sailing alongside us. It looked ancient, like something out of a history book. I called out to it, and for a moment I locked eyes with a man on its deck. He looked as terrified as I felt. Then the ship was gone, swallowed by the fog. It was during one of those endless nights that I first saw them. We called them time wraiths. Imagine a shadow-given form, constantly shifting and writhing. They moved through the air like oil through water, leaving trails of distorted reality in their wake. When they passed nearby, I could feel time stretching and compressing around me. One moment, I'd be young again, the next, ancient and withered. The pain was excruciating, like my very atoms were being pulled apart and slammed back together. The wraiths took my crew one by one. I'd hear a scream cut short, and another sailor would be gone. I don't know if they were killed or something else. All I know is that eventually I was alone on a ghost ship, drifting through an endless foggy void. I learned to hide from the wraiths. I discovered that they couldn't see me if I held my breath and remained perfectly still. So I'd spend hours, maybe days, crouched in dark corners, not daring to move a muscle as they glided by. The hunger and thirst were maddening, but fear kept me motionless. Sometimes I'd emerge from hiding to find that weeks had passed in what felt like hours to me. Other times, I'd hide for what seemed like months, only to come out and find that mere minutes had elapsed. But the true horror wasn't the wraiths. It was the visions. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw glimpses of other worlds, other times, ancient cities made of crystal, vast deserts of purple sand, oceans of liquid fire, and always I saw my home, Miami, changing, growing, evolving as the years passed me by. I watched my family age, saw my parents die, witnessed my little sister get married and have children of her own. It was like a cruel movie playing behind my eyelids, showing me everything I was missing. There were others trapped in the triangle with me, not just from my time, but from all throughout history. I met a Roman centurion, his armor corroded by time, but his body unchanged. We couldn't speak the same language, but the terror in his eyes needed no translation. I encountered a pilot from World War II, still frantically searching for her squadron, and once, in what seemed like a fever dream, I spoke with a woman in strange futuristic clothing who claimed to be from the year 2157. We were all trapped in the same timeless prison, our stories frozen while the world moved on without us. I don't know how I escaped. One moment I was huddled in the ship's hold, hiding from a particularly persistent wraith. The next, I was standing on a beach in the Florida Keys, coughing up seawater. A family having a picnic nearby called 911. When the paramedics arrived, they couldn't believe their eyes. To them, I was a living ghost, a man who hadn't aged a day since he disappeared in 1982. The world had moved on without me. My parents were gone. My little sister was a grandmother. The docks I grew up on had been replaced by luxury condos. Everything was louder, faster, more crowded. I felt like a relic, a man out of time. The technology alone was overwhelming. Smartphones, social media, self-driving cars. It was like I'd stepped into one of those sci-fi movies we used to watch on the ship during long voyages. The doctor couldn't explain my condition. Physically, I was the same 28-year-old who had set sail in 1982. But my mind, that was different. I had memories spanning decades, experiences that had aged me far beyond my years. The government got involved, of course. I spent months being debriefed, tested, studied. They wanted to know everything about the triangle, about the wraiths, about the other dimension. But how could I explain the inexplicable? How could I make them understand what it felt like to be unmoored in time? But that wasn't the worst of it, because I brought something back with me. The wraiths, they followed me. I see them sometimes out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement in a mirror, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. They're hunting me, and they're learning. At first, they could only manifest for split seconds in our world, but they're getting stronger. Last week, I saw one fully materialize in my backyard. It hovered there for almost a minute before dissipating. They're figuring out how to exist in our reality, and I'm terrified of what will happen when they master it. I've tried to warn people, but who would believe me? A man who claims he was trapped in another dimension for 40 years. They chalk it up to trauma, to PTSD. They don't understand the danger we're all in. The nightmares are the worst. Every night, I'm back in that fog, running from the wraiths. But now, the fog is spreading, engulfing cities, countries, the whole world. I wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced that this time it wasn't just a dream. I started noticing things, subtle changes in the world around me. Sometimes, just for a moment, time seems to slow down or speed up. I'll see people freeze in mid-motion or move at impossible speeds. Once, I swear I saw a car on the highway vanish into thin air, only to reappear a few seconds later, its driver oblivious to what had happened. The Bermuda Triangle isn't just a place where things disappear. It's a breach, a weak point between dimensions. And now, thanks to me, that breach is widening. The wraiths are coming, and they're hungry for time. Our time. They feed on it, distort it, destroy it. And with each passing day, their influence grows stronger. I'm telling you, this is a warning. If you see a shadow move in a way it shouldn't, if you feel time slow down or speed up around you, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because the wraiths are here, and they're looking for new victims to drag into their timeless abyss. I've tried to find others like me, other survivors of the triangle. I've reached out to conspiracy theorists, paranormal researchers, anyone who might believe my story. A few have listened. Some have even shared their own experiences, tales of lost time, impossible visions of brushes with entities that defy explanation. We're forming a network, trying to track the wraiths' movements, to understand their patterns. But it feels like we're always one step behind. As for me, I'm going back to the triangle. Maybe if I offer myself up, they'll leave this world alone. Or maybe I'll find a way to close the breach for good. I spent months preparing, studying oceanography, meteorology, even quantum physics. I've chartered a boat, gathered supplies. Tomorrow, I set sail for the coordinates where I disappeared all those years ago. I don't know what I'll find there. Maybe the fog will be waiting for me, ready to swallow me up again. Maybe I'll find nothing but empty ocean. Or maybe, just maybe, I'll find answers. A way to stop the wraiths, to seal the breach, to save our world from the horrors lurking in that timeless dimension. By the time you hear this, I'll be gone, one way or another. This is my last message to the world. Remember my story. Stay away from the triangle. And if you ever find yourself lost in that foggy void, do what I did. Hold your breath, stay still, and pray that the wraiths don't find you. Because once they do, you'll be trapped in a nightmare that lasts for eternity, just like I was. And if you ever feel time slip around you, if you ever catch a glimpse of a writhing shadow in the corner of your eye, remember, they're here. The wraiths have found our world, and they're hungry. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and whatever you do, don't let them catch you. The Phoenix Lights weren't just UFOs, they were the first wave, and they've been here ever since. I know because I was there, coordinating the Air Force's response from Luke Air Force Base. Colonel Jack Harmon, at your service. Well, former colonel. I doubt I'll keep my rank after breaking nearly 3 decades of silence, but the truth needs to come out, even if it destroys me. You've probably heard the official story. Flares, military exercises, mass hysteria. It's all expletive. What really happened that night in March 1997 was the beginning of the end for humanity as we know it, and I've been carrying this burden for far too long. I remember every detail of that night like it was yesterday. The cool desert air, the stars twinkling innocently above, completely unaware of the chaos about to unfold. I was pulling a late shift, nothing unusual for a Friday night. We'd been tracking some anomalous radar signals for the past week, but Brass told us it was probably just some glitch in the system. If only it had been that simple. At 2017, the first call started coming in. Civilians reporting strange lights in the sky, moving in perfect formation. I brushed it off at first. You'd be surprised how often people mistake normal aircraft for UFOs. But then the volume of calls exploded. This wasn't just a few confused stargazers. Something big was happening. I remember picking up the red phone, the one that connected directly to my superior, General Hawthorne. "Sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we've got a situation here." There was a long pause on the other end, too long. When the general finally spoke, his voice was tight and controlled. "Colonel Harmon, initiate protocol Zulu 9. This is not a drill." I repeat, this is not a drill. My blood ran cold. Zulu 9 was a protocol I'd only ever seen in training exercises, a response to confirmed extraterrestrial contact. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. I scrambled a couple of F-16s to intercept. Standard procedure. What wasn't standard was the sudden appearance of black SUVs and men in suits at our base. They took over our comms, feeding us coordinates, barking orders. These guys weren't from the Air Force. Probably NSA or some shadowy agency I'd never heard of. The pilots reported visual contact with something. Their voices were tense, confused. "Sir, this doesn't make sense. It's changing shape. Oh, God." Then static. Both jets went dark simultaneously. That's when all hell broke loose. Alarms blared, radar systems went haywire, and a blinding light flooded the base. For a moment, I thought I was dead. When my vision cleared, they were there, among us. They looked human, mostly, but their eyes, empty, reflective like polished obsidian, and their movements were too fluid, too precise. I'll never forget the chill that ran down my spine when one locked eyes with me and smiled. It wasn't a human smile. The men in black seemed to know them, speaking in hushed tones, words like integration and assimilation floating around. I was ushered out, debriefed, and sworn to secrecy. They said it was a matter of national security and that the public wasn't ready for the truth. For years, I kept quiet. I watched the news, saw the ridiculous flare explanation, and noticed the subtle changes in society, technology, and politics. They were infiltrating every level, slowly but surely, hybrid beings, part human, part something else. Products of a long-term plan we'd unknowingly agreed to. I tried to live a normal life after that night. Got married, had kids, tried to forget. But how do you forget something like that? How do you look at the world the same way when you know it's really out there? I started noticing things, little things at first, the way some people moved just a bit too smoothly, the way technology seemed to advance in sudden leaps as if guided by an unseen hand, the subtle shift in our culture towards uniformity, towards a kind of eerie calmness in the face of global chaos. I tried to investigate discreetly, of course. I reached out to some of the other officers who were there that night. Most wouldn't talk to me. Those who did seemed changed. Their words were right, but their eyes were wrong, empty, like they'd been hollowed out and filled with something else. One night, about 5 years after the incident, I got a visit from an old friend, Major Tom Rye. He'd been one of the pilots that night, one of the ones we thought we'd lost. He showed up at my door looking haggard, desperate. "Jack," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they're everywhere. They're in our governments, our schools, our families. We didn't stop an invasion that night. We opened the door for one." Before I could ask him more, a black van pulled up. 2 men in suits got out. Tom's eyes went wide with fear. He shoved a USB drive into my hand and ran. I never saw him again. The drive contained files, hundreds of them, satellite images, medical reports, classified memos. It painted a picture of a world already lost, humanity being slowly but surely replaced by something other. Why am I speaking out now? Because it's gone too far. Last month, my granddaughter was born. When I held her and looked into her eyes, I saw that same obsidian gleam. My son and daughter-in-law act like nothing's wrong, but their behavior has changed. They're too calm, too accepting. I think they've been replaced. The Phoenix Lights weren't a first contact scenario. They were a coming-out party, a signal that the final stage was beginning. We're not being invaded. We're being phased out, replaced by something that looks like us but isn't. I'm breaking my silence because someone needs to know to fight back. But I'm not naive. By the time you hear this, I'll probably be gone, disappeared, replaced, or worse. Look around you. Look closely at your friends, your family, your coworkers. Do you really know who they are anymore? They're among us, and they're patient. The lights in the sky were just the beginning. The real horror is the shadows walking beside us every day, wearing familiar faces, waiting for the right moment to shed their human disguise. You might be wondering why they don't just take over all at once, why the slow, methodical replacement. I've thought about this a lot. I think they need us, at least for now. They need our world, our infrastructure, our knowledge. They're learning from us, becoming us until one day they won't need us anymore. And the scariest part, most people will never notice. The change is too gradual, too subtle. By the time it's obvious, it'll be too late. If you're listening to this, you're one of the few who know the truth. Be careful. Trust no one, and whatever you do, don't look too long into anyone's eyes. You might not like what you see staring back at you. This is Colonel Jack Harmon, signing off. If I don't make it, remember, the truth is out there, hiding in plain sight. God help us all. Yes, if you're hearing this, it means my worst fears have come true. I've set up this recording to be released automatically if I don't check in regularly. So if you're listening, I'm already gone. But don't let my sacrifice be in vain. The truth is out there now. Use it. Fight back. It might already be too late for me, but maybe, just maybe, it's not too late for humanity. Remember, they're watching. They're always watching. Good luck. You're going to need it.